right, hello everyone. For those of you who are joining asynchronously, this is the start of our ASME Berkeley Boeing panel. I'd like to welcome our guests Miriam, Ling, and Kelly from Boeing. And my name is Michael. I'll be kind of co-hosting this panel along with Ryan. And yeah, let's get started. So why don't we start by hearing a little bit about you all. Why don't we hear about, I guess, your experience with Boeing, what you work as right now, maybe your background educationally, and kind of your career path.
All right, I'll start. I'm Kelly Morrison. We're all three of us, myself, Ling, and Miriam, are all Cal alums. So I graduated in 2016 with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. I was also a transfer student, if that interests anyone. So I did my first 2 years at University of Hawaii, and then my last 2 years at Berkeley. And during that time, I was having summer internships at Boeing in the Seattle area, and I've worked at Boeing since I graduated. In a few different engineering disciplines. I think I included them in the bio we sent out, so I don't want to just bore you with what you might have already read. But yeah, that's me.
Actually, you just reminded me, I totally forgot to share my screen here. This is the introduction panel here. Let me know if you guys can see the screen.
Looks like it's going to show. Yep, there it is.
So here we have our guests. We have Kelly.
There we go.
Miriam. So let's please carry on other introductions.
Here, I'll go since I'm in the middle. My name is Ling Wang. I am a 2012 undergrad from mechanical engineering at Berkeley, and then I got my master's. I didn't do the 5th year, I did the regular master's and finished that in 2013. Like Kelly, I also interned at Boeing while I was a student. I think I started my junior year, and then I've been working here ever since. I was in the 777 program as a design engineer for 5 years, and then I went back to school for my MBA. So I can relate to the snakes comment. And I've been back for 7 months, and I'm on the flight line right now as a flight line operations manager on the tanker program. So that's why I have my reflective vest for all the safety purposes.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Miriam Melendez. I graduated with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering December 2019, so semester before all the craziness happened, got out right in time. And then I got my first internship with Boeing the summer before my senior year, and then after that I got a full-time job at Boeing, working as a liaison engineer. And yeah, and I've been there since April.
Awesome. So nice to meet all of you. I'm going to stop sharing now because it absolutely makes my computer go crazy. But thank you all so much for the introductions. It's so nice to meet all of you. And for anyone just joining us, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, before we go any further, I just want for everybody to sign in. I posted the link in the chat, so yeah, just fill out the Google form and it'll be good.
Awesome. All right. For anyone also just joining us, there's a few ways to ask questions. If you have any, you can either shoot them in the chat or raise your hand on Zoom, and we can go through them kind of sequentially. Or if you don't feel comfortable sharing it publicly, you can direct message it to either me or Ryan, and we'll ask it for you. So in the meantime, we do have some other questions that we've kind of prepared as well. So I guess I'll start off this first question to Kelly, since you answered the first one. So, we kind of talked a little bit about kind of backstory and experience with Boeing, but I guess more from the interest side of things, how did you know that aerospace was the right direction to go for you?
Well, kind of trial and error, I would say, throughout high school and college, I knew I was interested in engineering. And I did a few different engineering extracurricular activities. One was very construction based, and I realized I didn't really like that after doing it. I mean, it was a great learning experience, but yeah, so it kind of, I knew I didn't want to do that. And then when I was in college, Boeing came and gave an info session. very much like the ones you guys host. And I went to it just on a whim. I said, here's a company that might be able to employ me at some point. And I went to it and I just thought what they did was so cool. We're mostly aerospace, but we do a few other things too. And it's just such a vast company with a bunch of different products that it just made sense to me. It was like, you just see something and that was my experience at the Boeing info session. And I just knew I wanted to work there. So that's when I started pursuing an internship there.
So great to hear. And I'll pose the same question as well to Ling and Miriam. I guess kind of, how did you know that the aerospace and working for Boeing was the right direction to go in?
I don't think I was not as purposeful as Kelly. I was more wanting to move to the Seattle area, and Boeing was the first offer I got and I took it. I stayed because, like Kelly mentioned, it's such a diverse company that I've been able to get all the experiences that I want within the company, and I've been really supported in my development process. So, for example, I really wanted to start my first full-time job in product development, and just reaching out to product development managers, someone was like, hey, I'll give you an offer. So I got the job I wanted. I wanted to go do 777X afterwards, called a manager, this made me an offer. When I wanted to go into manufacturing, like 3 years ago, same process. I called up the director and he said, hey, I'll give you an opportunity. So I moved into manufacturing. So it's been like, it's a very supportive community that I've experienced. And I haven't felt the need to go to any other company because I've gotten everything I want with the connections that I've built over time. And then more on like a metaphorical level, it's pretty amazing working around planes. Like I don't think there's another product that's on the scale of what we make. And every time a plane, like I work on the flight line. So literally I'm looking at the runway right now. I can't show you guys, but the runway's right in front of my car. And every time a plane takes off, everybody stops and everybody looks up. And that's something that hasn't changed, even though the employees I manage are in their like 50s and 60s and they've been in the company for 30, 40 years. It's still the same process every time a plane takes off. And I think that kind of awe isn't something that I've experienced at other companies or heard about. So it's like the meeting all the needs of me from a career development perspective, and also just the emotional connection to the planes that you develop over time.
That's awesome. Must be very exciting to see the product of your work just take off right in front of you.
When it wants to. Sometimes they don't want to fly, but bad days are sometimes happen.
Okay. So for me, I think it was more, it really developed over time. In high school, I was part of a FIRST robotics team, and a lot of my mentors worked at Boeing because I'm from SoCal. So like we had the Long Beach, Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, all those plants. So like all our mentors were from Boeing. And I think it was just their love for the company, and they would set up these like demonstrations that we would do at like the Boeing courtyard. So they would take us in during lunch hour, and we would get to like show off these robots to all the Boeing employees, and they tell us about what do we do. And it was just like the coolest experience ever. And they just had such passion for what they did at Boeing that, just kind of like oozed into me. Like it's kind of like a weird word to use, but yeah. And then I got to Berkeley, and I thought I wanted to work on cars because like Cal FSAE looks really cool. So like I tried that, and it just like wasn't like what I was looking for, and just wasn't the type of work that I wanted to do. And then I tried working on the construction side with my first internship, and it also just like it was very dull and like to me personally. So it just kind of like reassured me that like Boeing and aerospace was what I really wanted to do.
Awesome. I think we have a few other FIRST alumni in this group, I think. If you do want to share that, feel free to raise your hand if you're a FIRST alum. But it seems like a pretty great way to get involved with engineering to start.
Yeah, it was. It was really awesome.
Awesome. Right.
Yeah. So hearing that all of you have tried a lot of various things throughout your undergrad or during school, I just wanted to also ask if during your career in Boeing, if you've also had the same experience where you've tried a lot of different things at Boeing as well. And right, and that kind of influence what you're doing right now, like what you've learned, like you don't what you don't like doing at your time at Boeing, and what you do like doing right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I can go into a little more detail about the jobs that I've had. During my internships, I was a design engineering intern. So it was very much designing parts using 3D modeling software. Like we use, wow, I haven't, so it's like AutoCAD. We use CATIA. Sorry, I haven't used it in a few years, so I get confused. But yeah, I used that. And then when I came in full time, I was a manufacturing engineer, which is more working with the installation plans for our equipment. So making sure that the literal procedures that are written to physically install our equipment make sense. And doing that for every plane that comes through. I learned a lot, and it gave me a good understanding of the manufacturing process and how to make designs actually realistic for manufacturing. You can make a beautiful design, but if you can't manufacture it, there's no point. So I learned a lot there, but the day-to-day was just a little too, I guess, monotonous for me, and it wasn't really what I saw myself doing full-time. So I did, after that, pivot into design engineering. So again, I was working with 3D modeling and creating parts. And I was really happy doing that. And then one day, a manager that I knew, never worked for before, but I knew from my first program that I was on, called me and offered me a job on her team because she was just starting a new team on a different program and hiring. And it was a systems engineering position, which is the one I'm in now. I know systems engineer can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different companies and even teams. But basically what I do is I serve as an equipment manager, which I'm not managing anyone, I'm just managing a piece of equipment. So we have a piece of mechanical equipment, and I'm kind of in charge of making sure that it's working every time it needs to. If there are any issues with it, I track those down and kind of figure out the root cause, and then put together a plan on how we're going to remedy it. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience so far. It's been really varied, and each job move that I've made has been better and better for me. So I enjoy my current position the most out of all of them. So yeah, I've had a pretty good time so far.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I just want to add, I think usually when you join Boeing as a new hire, we usually try to encourage new hires to rotate into a new job role every year to 2 years, so you can get that diversity of experience. Like I went through like 5 different jobs in my first 4 years. The managers are usually really supportive of it, mostly because the company is so big and they want you to find where you fit in. So encouraging informational interviews so you can get to know different organizations. Informational interviews are just like calling up a manager or an engineer or whoever in a team that you're interested in, asking just to sit down for some information, like informal interview kind of thing. So we really encourage those. So the mobility and diversity of experience is really significant here, and they do emphasize it. And it is a supported thing. So it's not like you're on your own trying to learn about the rest of the company.
Great. And Miriam, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what were some of the other positions you worked as before?
So I don't have a lot of experience as like a full-time because I just started in April. But my current position as a liaison engineer, basically what I do is like when a plane is being built, like let's say like someone just accidentally like rams into it with a forklift, like my job is to like figure out, like analyze the dent, figure out how it can be fixed, figure out if it can be fixed, and like fix it, or like tell them to fix it. So in order to be able to do this job, you need an MRB certification, which basically just gives you like FAA authority to make this repair and like change the per drawing requirements. And so in order to do that, they have this really long training process. And it's just like a rotational program. So you rotate through a whole bunch of different like programs. You go 3-7, you go 6-7, you go 777X, you do all the programs and you just do the same job at all the different locations. So in that way you get to like experience like a whole bunch of different sets of problems and like types of problems. So you go from composite repairs to pure like aluminum, steel repairs, to more holes, to more electrical. So in that way, I've gotten like a lot of experience in like a vast variety of different problems. So in that sense, I've kind of like figured out that I'm not very good at structural types of problems because it's a lot of math. But they're really interesting and they're the most fun to tackle. And I found that I'm not really good, but I get a better hang of electrical problems. And you know, it's kind of just been like that. So although my job isn't technically a rotation, it does have like a rotational aspect to it in order for you to like get the training that you need. So I guess in that sense, I've gotten like a little bit more experience in that.
We had a couple questions in the chat. Looks like Ling answered one of them. It was, does that happen a lot? Talking about kind of like the accidents, and Ling said more than we'd expect.
Yeah, when I was first starting during my first month, they were carrying an engine on a forklift and somehow they dropped it. Yeah, it was really bad, and people were like flocking to the engine to look at it. Yeah, it was not pretty. What are the most common types of incidents that occur that need repairs? Mostly it's like holes that are damaged. So like there's like a pilot hole and then you like back drill it and you miss it and then it looks like a little snowman. But you get a ton of those. We also just get we get some dents, we get like tiny little scratches and tool marks. So we just all have to plan those out, just stuff like that, like the tiniest little things, the things that you would like working on like a small little car or rocket, you would just like discard and be like, oh, it's just a tiny little scratch. Like you have to fix all of that.
The significance of Miriam's role is that the mechanics, like the teams that I manage, they can't do any work that's not per drawing. So the second there's any sort of nick or tear, like she said, we have to have engineering disposition and statement of work for us to do the repair. So literally any little damage, the liaison team has to get their hands on it and tell us how to fix it.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. So another question we had is if all three of you could talk a little bit about what your experience has been like as women in engineering at Boeing, and I guess if you know what kinds of support you have there.
I guess I'll start again. I think we have kind of an order, but my experience has been really great. I think more than half of the managers that I've had have been women. And I think that's done a lot. I will say there isn't a difference in how women treat me or how men treat me, really. I think everyone is very aware of how to treat people as equals in the workplace. I will say I am speaking just from my experience. Obviously, everyone has different ones. So yeah, I think it's gone pretty well so far. And you know, like I said, management representation is really good. I mean, there are still occasions where you'll be in a meeting and you'll be the only woman or the only person under 35 or both. But for the most part, people act fine. I will say, maybe it's just me, but I feel like now that we're working remotely, I do get talked over a little more in meetings, maybe just because we're not all, you know, in a room looking at each other. I mean, you know, being remote leaves a lot to be desired in terms of communication in general. But besides that, I've had it pretty easy. I guess you could say, I mean, like people have been doing the bare, you know, people have acted fine. Like, you know, no one's done anything terrible. But at the same time, yeah, I guess you would say my experience is kind of middle of the road, nothing terrible, nothing insanely mind-blowing when it comes to advancing women in the workplace, but I also haven't really sought that out. I am a member of our SWE group and we do some stuff, so that's fun, but yeah.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. Pretty much the same experience. Had some pretty cool female mentors. There's definitely like my director here on the flight line is female, and she holds like a dinner every once in a while for all the females that she mentors. But nothing terrible. Definitely a majority male still, but I'm seeing the change even the time that I've been here. A lot more females coming up through the ranks and being hired through engineering. So positive signs, but nothing too significant.
I've kind of had a sort of different experience in terms of like managers not being female. Like all my managers and most of the people that I work with are males, but I think that's also part of the liaison engineering culture by itself. It's known to kind of, you know, not contain a lot of women, and like a lot of women start but then they leave very quickly. So actually they're starting a like women and liaison engineering group at Boeing just to try to like figure out why they're not retaining any female engineers. So that's a good thing. I think they're still finishing up the initial survey. But I mean, I don't really like get looked down upon other than the fact that like I'm a trainee, so I need to be taught everything. So it's to be expected. I'm also like, I look young and I'm like 5'1", so I'm tiny. So like all these like mechanics in the shop just kind of treat me like their child. And I'm kind of okay with that because they just like teach me everything. And that's kind of what I need to know at this point. But like I've never like been disrespected or like treated badly. But it is, you know, very often that, you know, I'm the only female under 35, one person of color in the room at most given times, because there's no one else.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Our next question is about, I guess, one that I've worried about personally, and I think some other people might share the sentiment, is seems to be a difference between kind of smaller companies, more nimble startup style companies to work for versus more established players like Boeing, who are much more, and I suppose you guys are talking about just the amount of precision that needs to go into every step of even fixing something like a scratch. And you know, obviously that's a very different, you know, company culture. And I was wondering if you could explore some of that, you know, how the company culture at Boeing and the size of that compares to maybe other positions or teams you've worked in the past. And just to mix up the order here, why don't we start with Miriam?
Wow, changing it up.
Yeah.
So I actually have a very close friend who works at another startup company that they make rockets or whatever. And I've definitely like seen the culture shock. But I don't think that Boeing's way of doing it is necessarily incorrect, because, you know, we're like pumping out airplanes. So like there needs to be like a certain level of regulation and you know, like quality assurance that we give our customers, because like we want to make sure that every plane that we give out is as good as it can be and that the customer is going to be happy. Whereas like some startups are like, yeah, you're doing all the work yourself, everything's a lot faster, but like you're making kind of like a prototype, or you're making like at a first time or at a much slower rate. So you have like more time to like figure things out, and it's not expected to be perfect or like be or like maybe even like last forever, if you want to put it like that. So I don't know, I feel like Boeing is the way it is just because it's so, you know, ingrained in society, and it has like such a giant name to uphold, and like making sure that they have control over every little detail makes sense in order to maintain it that way.
Thank you. That does make a lot of sense. Yeah. Anything to add, either Ling or Kelly?
Sure. I might just be repeating what Miriam said, but yeah, like she said, Boeing is known for having a lot of processes and stuff like that, but I think it's super important that we do because of the volume that we're working with, and these planes, yeah, the planes are just huge. They cost a lot. There's a lot that goes into them. So many different tiny parts that go into them. So the documentation, if you work for Boeing, you'll deal with it a lot, but you'll also appreciate it. It is so important, because the last thing you'd want is for, something to fall through the cracks and a plane to not work how it's supposed to. So yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, especially for something as important and necessary that it needs to work perfectly as an airplane. So thank you for your insight into that.
I wanted to add a couple of thoughts. I think that there's, depending on which group you're in at Boeing, the pace is decidedly different. The regulations are always going to be there, just because we have to be accountable for like every screw that goes on the planes. But like, I'm working on the flight line right now, like our planes deliver. So this is the most urgent job I've ever been in. Things are like 30-minute, hour-long turnarounds. You have literally minutes to make decisions when something breaks. So the urgency is a lot more than, I want to say, even at like Apple or something, when your product cycles are a year long. But if you're upstream in the development, if you're in PD, you're working on like 30-year cycle projects. So it's a lot slower. So it's really, it does depend on which organization you're in as well.
That's great to hear. I had no clue there was, I guess that makes sense that there's so much variation within the company. All right, well, thank you all. I think we'll be moving on to the next section here of the Q&A. This section's all about advice. For us undergrad students, love to get your input on these things. And to start off, just a more generic question. What is the best advice you wish someone had given you when you were an undergrad in our position here? I'll give you guys a minute to think. I know that's always tough to come up with advice on the spot.
I have my go-to answer. I always say, don't focus on the hard skills, focus on the soft skills. You can be the best engineer in the room, but if you're not able to communicate your ideas, if you're not able to build the relationships with your stakeholders, it's not going to get you anywhere. We have a lot of really great engineers that I've worked with in the past, and no one will work with them because they're not able to understand what they're trying to convey. So I know engineering at Berkeley is very focused on hard skills, but I promise you, when you get out in the world, whether you come to Boeing or anywhere else, you're gonna need to work on the communication and soft skills. So don't underestimate that side.
Great, thank you. Can definitely attest to the hard skill focus of theory classes at Berkeley. Someone in the chat had a question. Kyle, do you have any, or excuse me, do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, just like examples of, when you saw soft skills really take effect in the workplace, and, why they were so valuable as opposed to what you talked about, like hard skills. I'm curious, like, some examples or stories, I guess, anonymous or.
I want to hear Kelly and Miriam's stories. I bet they have some already, but I think literally every project I've worked on, sorry, my work phone's going off. Every project I've worked on, you're working with peers. So I had like one sound engineer guy that nobody wanted to go talk to because he didn't know how to communicate. He was the most senior sound engineer on the team. His desk looked like a hurricane blew through it on a daily basis. And just nobody wanted to deal with him because he was gruff, and he knew the information, but trying to get it out of him was so impossible. And I was always the one that got sent to go talk to him because I was willing to sit there for like 3 hours to get like 2 snippets of data out of him. So don't be that guy. And it's just, you have to sell your ideas, right? Like when you have a good idea, you have to sell it to your manager, you have to sell it to your team. You can't communicate it, no one's going to listen to you. You might have the best idea, it's not going to go anywhere. So we sell our, like as in PD, in development, in even on the flight line now, you're constantly trying to improve. And so you're always coming up with ideas, and it sucks if you can't get people to follow through on them. Yeah.
I would say examples of how you can, so it's not going to be like a story like Ling's, but an example of how you can do that now is when you are a student, you know, you can join different groups like ASME, all other kind of project groups, and that'll give you things to talk about. And that just talking about those things, whether it's with the group itself or your friends who are in engineering or not in engineering, or your family, and ultimately maybe recruiters, just getting that kind of practice is huge. And I highly encourage that. I agree with Ling that your soft skills are probably what's going to take you the farthest, in terms of, at least at this stage in your career, you know, being in undergrad and trying to transition into full-time work. Being able to communicate your engineering skills and work is huge. So get practice doing that.
All right, thank you so much. Also, just, you know, in the interest of time, I'm probably going to shift here from, instead of hearing answers from all three of you, maybe only one person answering. And then if anyone else has anything to add that wasn't covered sufficiently, then please, you know, chime in. But just, you know, we got a lot more questions to go through, and I don't want to hold anyone here late. So thank you for that. Our next question is someone in the chat. They were asking, sorry, this was different. It was in not public chat, it was private message, but the question was about internships at Boeing, and kind of asking about what are the best ways to look, places to look, and ways to go about doing so. And you know, the question is, you know, comparing search online compared to maybe you know, career fairs or info sessions that Boeing may host. How do you recommend going about these things?
Kelly, you want to take that as our campus team leader?
Sure. Okay. So I would say for internships at Boeing, it sounds like, well, Michael, you already named all the avenues pretty much. So yeah, we have our online just job career center. Like for any company, if you're looking to apply for a job and look through what's currently offered, you would go online and find those. You definitely can always apply to those. But you know what, beyond that, the reason that our campus team exists, you know, me, Ling, Miriam, the other folks that are invested in, you know, connecting with you guys and keeping our relationship with Berkeley strong in general. We're here for you to refer to. So if you do want to apply online, I would recommend, you know, you're a member of ASME, so going through ASME and contacting one of us. So you can say, hey, Michael, can you put me in contact with Kelly? I applied to a job rec and I just want her to have me on her radar. That's something you can do. And, you know, also you mentioned info sessions and recruiting events. That is where we do our more direct recruiting. We, as the campus team, come to Berkeley. It's been harder, obviously, when we're not doing it in person, and we're still working through how to make that as efficient for both parties as possible. But yeah, when we're on campus, try to make as many connections with us as you can, because we just want to get to know you. And like I mentioned earlier, we want to hear about your engineering experiences and skills. And we'll do our best to get you placed somewhere if we think it's a good fit. So Michael kind of already answered the question, but I just backed him up on it.
That was in the question itself. So thank you very much for your insight on that. Next question we have is about grad school for people who want to go into maybe a career in aerospace. And what are your thoughts on grad school for aerospace? Is it necessary? Is it something that people should go out of their way for, or maybe not?
Okay, I can take this one too. But Ling, if you want to chime in, feel free. So I, while I was working at Boeing, I got my master's in materials engineering online at USC. Boeing has a program where if you get a degree that's, you know, relevant to the business So basically any engineering thing, there's a lot of like finance and other stuff that would apply because Boeing has that as well. They will pay your tuition. So I took advantage of that and still worked full time while I got my degree. I will say I haven't gone into, since I graduated in May, I haven't gone into a more materials focused position just because I really like the position I have. The main reason I did the degree is because I just felt like I didn't know much or enough, as much as an engineer should, about materials, I guess. So it was mainly just for interest. I would say it's, I mean, my view is I had it paid for, so that's a huge factor. In my opinion, it was worth it. You know, it was 2 years of my evenings and weekends doing schoolwork outside of work, but it was worth it because I learned, you know, what I wanted to, and now I have a master's degree. And the only reason that I haven't really used it yet is I think, you know, like I said, I like my position now. We're kind of in COVID. I'm not trying to make any drastic moves right now. But I know that at Boeing, if I wanted to, I could definitely go into a materials position. So from now on, it's up to me what I make of it. Ultimately, I do think it's worth it though.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry, my my lead called with an emergency. I would agree with Kelly that it's a really good option to have Boeing help pay for it. I chose not to because I am not as diligent as Kelly, and I'm not good at doing work after work. So I chose to go back full time, but Boeing also, like the program that I went to, MIT's LGO program is 100% sponsored by Boeing. So Boeing actually sent me to go get my MBA and my AeroAstros master's program full time, fully on their dime. So there's options for full time and part time tuition reimbursement from Boeing. I think that if you don't want to get your master's, if you just wanted to come work at Boeing, the teams will teach you everything you want to know. My pursuit of the master's is more personal interest. I wanted to explore more of like the academia side of the practical things that we learn here. I want to learn the theory behind it. So that's mostly why I went back for my master's.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So the next question we have here is asking, what are some important skills or classes that you recommend taking as an undergrad or a graduate student if you want to enter the aerospace industry?
I'm just gonna go on a limb here and say probably the aerodynamics class, which is only offered, I think, one semester per year. It's just like a really good basis for how planes work, which is probably a good idea if you want to work in aerospace. It's like definitely not required, but I think it really gave me like a good background, and that class was a lot of fun. So that would be like my biggest one.
Awesome. Do you think that, you know, it's tangent question, do you think that a lot of the skills that you learned in college are applicable in the day-to-day at Boeing, or is it more specialized job tasks?
I feel like that really depends on what you're doing at Boeing, because me personally, like I'm doing a lot of like practical stuff. So I'm not really like using many equations. Like sometimes I'll use like a very basic equation that you learn in like in like dynamics, solid mechanics or something like that. Sometimes you'll use that and then call it a day. And then, but most of the math, you know, is done by like the stress engineers who like, if we don't know how to answer a problem, we'll like send it to the stress analysis and then they do all the crazy math. So like, but if you're a stress analysis, you would definitely be using all that math. So like, it really depends on like where you're working, and like people's level, like knowledge of like this theory just varies so much within the company. So it like if you wanted to like really use what you used in college, you can definitely find a spot there at Boeing. And if you don't, probably like me, you can probably choose something like more practical.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That wraps up all the advice questions that, well, most of the advice questions we have prepared. I'd like to open this up,
Sorry, I got a personal or like a private chat question, so I'll just read that out loud. What advice can you give to people who don't have any internship or club experience? What skills should they need to find a job at Boeing? Can you, yeah. So yeah, any of you have any advice about that?
Sure. I would say, I mean, just because I can only imagine, like I said, in college, it must be hard to be in like clubs and stuff during COVID. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that. And I feel for all of you guys. But I would say it's good to at least have something to talk about that will set you apart. So even, you know, if you're not in a club, you can still maybe pursue something on your own. I'm sure, I know that things have kind of been booming in terms of at-home hobby kits and stuff during COVID. So there's a lot of technical stuff out there that you can work on, or even just research, you know, as long as you have something besides just your coursework, because everyone with the same major has pretty much the same coursework. Maybe you have an elective that you can expand on, or like I said, you can take up something outside of school that just kind of, that you're passionate about, that you're able to talk about, that kind of demonstrates your skills. And I will say, I mean, it's hard for companies too, right, to figure out how they want to hire people with, you know, this year or so, maybe more, who knows, of people not having the same resources that they usually do. So yeah, just as long as you have something to talk about that shows how great you are, that's what I would recommend.
Awesome, thank you. We had one more question in the chat, which was, I'll address this to everyone. It's less of a question to our panelists and more to us as hosts, but what's the best way to stay in contact with all of you wonderful people and other potential, I'm expanding the question now, people who ASME is hosting? The answer to that is to join and become a part of ASME and to reach out to us directly. You know, as Kelly mentioned before, if you ever want to get into contact with our panelists, reach out to us, we can connect you. And if you're not a part of the mechanical engineering Slack, I'll send a link in the chat to join up. The info on how to join is in there, as well as any other meetings we go to. Okay, now that the plug's over, I have one other question from other people, and actually do also want to open it up to, this has been the case all along, but more focused group question time. If anyone has a question they want to ask directly, feel free to, you know, just chime in now and ask, or raise your hand, or whatever. And yeah, if not, you can go to some other questions, but I want to give you guys a chance here.
It's a really basic question, but what's the coolest part about working at Boeing or with planes?
I guess I'll start. The coolest part about working at Boeing for me is definitely getting to work in the factory where all the airplanes are being built. You can just like my job is right on the floor, so I have to go out and like see like where there's a nick or a gouge or a hole bad. So I actually get to walk on these like half-built airplanes, sometimes even a fully built one, and it's just like the most amazing feeling to like walk in and see it like bare bones. Like it's just enormous. And then when you get to compare how big the 737 is compared to like a 767, you're just like, this is bigger than my house. Well, I guess I'll move here. I don't know. It's just like, it's astounding. And then you see how thin the walls of the fuselage are, and you're like, I can't believe I trust this with my life. So yeah, that's my coolest part.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and agree. I think most people at Boeing will say similar things, you know, just getting to be hands-on and see the products that we make, because it's not something you do every day, you know, like you might use some other pieces of tech like your phone every day. And so it's less, I guess, neat. I mean, phones are fantastic and impressive, and I still don't fully understand how they work. So that's awesome. But yeah, planes, like I've been working in defense for the past few years, and like whenever I go on the plane, especially in the flight deck or anywhere that has controls, I'm like, this looks like museums. Like it's like I get to actually be there on the ones that are actually going to go into the air, and it's the stuff that everyone else can only see in a museum. And it's just neat because it feels like kind of a time machine, even though these are current planes. So yeah, like Miriam said, just the access to this cool stuff that not everyone gets to see every day.
And I just got a message from Ling saying she had to step away for a minute for a quick emergency. So yeah, we won't be hearing an answer for that one. Any other questions? Feel free to ask, obviously.
I had a quick question. First, I'd like to thank all of you speakers for coming. It's really cool to be able to talk to people from Boeing, but I was just like wondering, I think Miriam was talking about how her branch was kind of like, had a different type of like team culture. So I was like wondering, as you like rotate between the teams, are there very like different atmospheres for each team? And is that like a really big factor of whether you stay in that team?
That's a really good question. There's actually, every team has its own culture. So even though we're all doing the same exact job, just on different like types of airplanes, different programs, like depending on who's working there, like the team culture can vary a lot. So I'll have teams that like are very talkative, like they didn't know me, but they invited me to lunch on my last day. Like, and then I'll have other teams where I literally just get sat there and then like no one talks to me for a whole month. Like I only get talked to if I ask a question. So it's very different. And I mean, the rotations are already laid out for me. So when I got hired into this job, like a month later, I got an email like, okay, these are all the rotations you're gonna do. You're gonna spend 1 month here, 1 month here. So I never actually had to like worry about like where I was going next. But there are definitely, because of like that shift in company culture, there's definitely like some teams that I would love to return to, and then there's some teams that I would obviously like would not prefer to stay there. But on the other hand, like shifting through so many teams like so quickly, like a month is not long in terms of a job. You're like with them for like 5 days, 8 hours a week. It's not a long time in the long term of things. I think that's kind of really taught me how to communicate better with people and how to build relationships quickly, because you have to quickly become comfortable asking them questions that you feel are stupid but might not be to them. And so you have to like reach like a certain level of self-confidence and be like, okay, I trust you, please train me. So in that sense, like the rotations have been really good, but it really does depend on like who your assigned mentor is and like what the team and company culture is like.
Great, thank you. We have one more question in the chat, which is how important is, also I know it's 5 o'clock, so if you guys do have to hop off, please, thank you for coming. But we have one last question we can probably try to fit in here before too late. And the question is, how important is leadership experience compared to other skills when finding an internship or job?
I would say, compared to other skills, that's a good question. I mean, we'll get the obvious out of the way that having leadership experience is better than not. And I know that's super annoying, but, or having leadership experience itself is not annoying, but that answer is annoying. I would say it kind of depends on what role you're looking for. So, if, oh, bye Cameron, I see in the chat. It just depends on what role you're looking for. Obviously, for people in entry-level positions out of undergrad, we're not looking for as much leadership experience as someone who's trying to be the lead of a team or something like that. And I'm just going to keep going back to what I said before. As long as you can talk to your skills and talk about how great you are, whatever that may mean in terms of what you can bring to the company or the team or the program you're applying to. That's really what matters. So I guess to explain a little further, like if you're looking for maybe a more technical position, then where you or just a position where you're doing kind of individual work every day, then leadership experience might not be as important in, say, your technical skills or your experience with a certain program. Say if you're a stress engineer, if you're used to using the programs that stress engineers use, I can name them because I've never been one, but that would be more important. So yeah, and I think it's nothing to worry about whether you have a certain skill or not. Ultimately, you'll end up wherever is the best fit for you. I know that it can be kind of hard when applying to jobs. It feels like there's a power imbalance, but I mean, remember that you're bringing things to the table too. Like, don't feel like just because places, I don't know, I'm definitely not trying to sound condescending. I'm trying to sound helpful. You have a lot to bring to the table too. And you're going to end up in the right place for you. And whoever hires you is going to be lucky to have you. This is what I tell myself too, and I have a job, So, yeah. Please do not stress about what skills you may have or not have.
Definitely something that's easy to forget as an interviewee is that they're interviewing you because they want you. So keep that.
Yeah. And it goes both ways. You're allowed to be picky too, if a job doesn't sound fun to you, then you don't need to take it. Obviously you want a job in general, but
Kelly, Miriam, do you guys have time for one or two more?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about kind of the differences between working on a commercial aircraft versus a defense aircraft. Just some insight on why you would want to work on one over another, or maybe there's a difference in culture there when you're working on teams with that.
Yeah, sure. I did both my internships in commercial and then full time I've been in defense. And I will say there is a difference in culture. Day to day, there's not a difference because if you're a design engineer, you're a design engineer. If you're a different kind of engineer, you're a different kind of engineer. But overall, when it comes to just what you can kind of talk about, obviously, if you work in commercial, you can share a lot more with people on other commercial programs, ask them for help, and have easier access to the plane. But on defense programs, each one has different rules on what you can share or not. Like when I worked on Air Force One, I couldn't even really tell people outside of Boeing that I worked on that program. I just had to say I work in defense at Boeing. But now I work on the tanker program and I can tell anyone that, but there are still things that we're not allowed to share amongst programs. Like if I needed help on something on a high security program, I couldn't just ask someone from another program, probably. I'd have to keep it within my program. And there are a lot more restrictions on going onto the plane. In defense, it's a lot more likely that you'll need someone with higher security clearance to escort you onto the plane if you need to get on there. So I would say day-to-day culture isn't too different, but overall there are things that affect what you can and can't do and communicate and work on. And I guess to get really basic, in commercial, typically no one really needs a security clearance, but it's very common in defense to need one. Different programs require different levels of security clearance as well. I'm pretty unique in that I've worked in defense and never gotten a security clearance because it's just never really appealed to me and I've never needed one. But I do know that if I want to move up in my career within defense, I will eventually, it'll be good for me to get one. So
Thank you.
And then to add to that really quick, I also work on the P-8, the Poseidon plane, which is a military aircraft for a lot of different companies, for a lot of different countries. And like that plane compared to the work that I've done on commercial aircrafts has been like pretty different. In terms that like the defense aircrafts as a liaison engineer just have like a whole bunch of like really cool systems and like things you can learn about it. So they'll just like have like these like cool like stuff that you can like learn about because they have everything documented, or at least the things that we're allowed to see, right? And then like the commercial plans are kind of like more basic, but like still the basic structure. So from what I've heard from also the people who have been there longer than I have, they decided to stay with the defense aircraft just because it's cooler. So
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing and for all your wonderful answers. Welcome back, Ling, by the way. I hope the emergency got taken care of.
Sorry about that. We had to tow our plane and didn't have the right equipment. My bad.
No problem at all. I think I have just one more exciting, kind of fun question to ask, which is, what is the most exciting thing about the future of aerospace right now? Maybe from an inside perspective that we may not know about. What excites you? What's on the cutting edge right now? It's all top secret. I think we understand too.
I guess I honestly haven't been thinking too much about it just because we are kind of in a lull of travel. But and I honestly don't work in like, the cutting edge part of Boeing. I will say, I think that there always is, but there's going to be a big push for kind of safety. I mean, obviously we're trying to keep people safe in the air and from each other as well. So I think there's going to be a lot more attention to that, not only from, Boeing, but from the public as well. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's really important that air travel is comfortable for as many people as possible and accessible to as many people as possible. So, like I said, I'm not in charge of what the next big thing is, but I hope that is going to be a big thing.
I think I'm looking forward to our investments in personalized flying vehicles. I know like Boeing Next has investments in companies like that. Sorry, Miriam, I took your answer. That's just like a side fascination. Boeing's next division, if we didn't already talk about it, is the division that invests in like smaller companies that are doing really high tech innovative things in the aerospace industry. On a personal level, I'm really interested in commercial airplanes. So I'm looking forward to when the airlines are going back to investing in really cool interiors instead of doing like the same old lame economy seats that we all resent. For example, like Cathay was looking at putting like mahjong tables and stuff in their planes prior to COVID hitting, and then they had to shut it all down. So I'm looking forward to working on cool products like that again.
I guess I have to go to my plan B. I think Ling actually worked on this, but I'm just really excited to see the 777X come out into commercial use. Those folding wingtips really, they just really make me so happy. They're just so fun to see. And I got to work on the wings too, and I got to see how all the composite wings were made, and they like made some really cool machines to just make the wings themselves. It's like amazing. So I'm just really excited to finally see that come to life.
That's really exciting. Oh, we've actually have Bryant hopping on here. But thank you all so much for all your time and your energy in putting together these answers, and for being here. To everyone else who's attended, if you didn't fill out the form yet, for attendance, please do so now. Welcome, Bryant. Bryant is our ASME president. For those of you who don't know him, just got out of a lab, I imagine. But yeah, thank you all so much, for putting this together.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's always great to talk to you guys, not just at a career fair, but about more fun, interesting stuff that we care about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was just as informative and helpful for us. So awesome. I'm going to stop the recording here now.